Aloha and welcome to Capital Connection with your host, Senator Angus McKelvey. I'm your moderator, Tom Blackburn Rodriguez. Our guest today is Pa'ele Kiakona, a Lahaina resident, community activist, and a member of Lahaina Strong. He'll be interviewed a little bit later on in the program by Senator Angus McKelvey. And now your host of Capital Connection, Senator Angus McKelvey.
Aloha, everybody. Thank you, Tom, for the intro. Gary, our great engineer, and welcome again to another edition of the show.
And I know that you didn't run down to get your coffee this morning, didn't you?
Nope, no coffee for me, so I'm just going to have to power through it best I can, but that's okay.
Well, just to let you know, we don't have coffee here either. Well, Gary does.
We air sports with the San Francisco Giants and LA Dodgers baseball, the San Francisco 49ers and Las Vegas Raiders football, and NFL playoff games leading up to the Super Bowl. All of these shows, plus updated news every hour from CBS. It's 1110 on the AM dial and on the FM dial at 96.7, 98.7, and 96.5 on the west side. News, talk, and sports for Maui and beyond at KAOI1110.com worldwide.
Aloha and welcome to Capital Connection with your host, Senator Angus McKelvey. I'm your moderator, Tom Blackburn Rodriguez. Our guest today is Pa'ele Kiakona, a Lahaina resident, community activist, and a member of Lahaina Strong. He'll be interviewed a little bit later on in the program by Senator Angus McKelvey. And now your host of Capital Connection, Senator Angus McKelvey.
Aloha, everybody. Thank you, Tom, for the intro. Gary, our great engineer, and welcome again to another edition of the show.
And I know that you didn't run down to get your coffee this morning, didn't you?
Nope, no coffee for me, so I'm just going to have to power through it best I can, but that's okay.
Well, just to let you know, we don't have coffee here either. Well, Gary does. Gary has coffee, but we don't have coffee. So, Senator, I know there are a number of things you'd like to talk about, but you've been on Oahu in a special session. Is that right?
Yes, correct. We just finished our special session for the Senate only, and we confirmed two new Supreme Court judges that were sent down by the governor yesterday. And so the final vote was yesterday, and both the Republicans and the majority Democrats spoke in favor of the nomination, and it was unanimous votes. So they'll be replacing the two justices, associate justices, that retired because of the mandatory retirement age for justices in Hawaii.
What is that mandatory retirement age, Senator?
You had to ask me that question. I haven't had my coffee, Tom.
Something the word 70 comes up. 70 comes up in my mind.
70, yeah, I think believe it is. But yes, we'll totally admit, not off the top of my head, but yeah, it's one of the few states that has it, and it's been an issue of. It has been an issue that's gone back and forth as to why we have this hard date set in line, for judges, when normally it's a lifetime tenure for Supreme Court justices in other states. So that's something I'm sure will come up again repeatedly, and it has, because a lot of people feel that it's kind of ageist, for lack of a better word, just to say, okay, you're 70 or you've hit a certain age, therefore you can't serve anymore. That's it.
That's it.
Regardless of your individual circumstance.
Well, I can't be a Supreme Court justice then.
No, I think that has come and gone.
It's come and gone. Were there any issues, Senator, that you wanted to share with us that in the hearings at all, and maybe any resolution?
Well, the hearings themselves are pretty straightforward with the justices. So they were asked questions on their judicial temperament. They were asked questions on their thoughts on different things that are currently ongoing. The role of the Constitution. Some of the land use cases that have potentially come forward, what their views were with that, as well as their history and what others had to say about them. The public participation portion of this is just as important as would be with a bill. And so all the public testimony is reviewed before a decision is made. Then the other thing that we've been obviously working on is we're trying to work with the Department of Health and Director Fink on several things. One, of course, is the ever upcoming Phase 2 that people are now really hearing about. insofar as what efforts are going to be done to control the toxicity of the airborne dust during the debris removal, as well as, the concerns of people of the suicide rate having increased since the fires occurred, as well as the need for more mental health resources, and a bigger discussion on, because of the Lahaina fire tragedy, should the Department of Health be looking at trying to pivot into two agencies, one that deals directly with only public health, and another that deals with the kinds of issues that you see in the healthcare delivery system, which is the two parts of the Department of Health now. And the healthcare delivery system, there's perhaps a discussion to be had that maybe that should be bifurcated out of the Department of Health, so the Department of Health is solely focused in and all its apparatuses on public health and environmental health.
I see. The public health issue may be separated from the emergency health issues?
From the health service functions of the Department of Health. Like the State Hospital Planning Development Agency, SHPDA, is a classic example. They're an agency that only reviews certificate of needs, and many people have brought up, and rightfully so, that the certificate need has been there, done that. It's come and gone. Its usefulness is so. Could SHPDA be retooled as a planning agency to look at healthcare delivery systems in areas, particularly Maui? And what kind of planning is being done to expand them? And with Lahaina, we've lost all of our medical facilities.
That's right.
So this is a perfect role for SHPDA to reinvent itself into perhaps doing these kinds of things.
The Certificate of Need Center has always been controversial with the public and also with healthcare providers as to whether or not that actually enhances our healthcare or holds it back.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the Certificate of Need, the federal government used to require it. They don't anymore, and a lot of states have done away with it. And, it's the argument for it in the past has been, well, we want to make sure that they're viable, because if they're not, then the state has to come over and take them over.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think that the fact is that with healthcare types of operation systems, they have a viability with their own people to make it financially feasible to do it. And so a lot of this diligence and things being done are done already through the private sector, through that end. Because obviously you're not going to begin a medical service delivery endeavor if your own projections show that it's going to end up losing money potentially down the road, right? So, but then what it does for the consumer is it provides more services, more different kinds of services, and the ability to perhaps attract in different kinds of healthcare professionals, especially specialists. And one of the needs for West Maui and Maui in general has been perhaps expanded oncology services. And the certificate of need process is pointed out as an impediment towards trying to bring other cancer treatment services to Maui.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question does become, again, is that, in the developing of a hospital, the community, if there's no regulatory process to ensure, the community needs to ensure that, okay, is this going to be viable? Is this going to last the test of time? Or is this going to somehow run into financial jeopardy, and will there be a need for the state to step in to keep the health services that have been established going?
It's very interesting, Senator. Most people don't realize that competition in the healthcare field may not actually reduce cost, because everybody wants the latest and greatest instrument and technology, so they keep ratcheting up the cost. It's kind of a reverse system. It's hard to understand.
And that was kind of the discussion, that's been going on, is that if you have the Department of Health retooled, per se, with one division, one agency focusing in on healthcare delivery systems and costs, then it could try to address it through those types of systemic things. But to have an agency dedicated to this and other types of healthcare delivery services, costs, everything else, is kind of the idea behind it. There should be a focused central effort of the Department of Health agency to put all of these entities, these planning, these other entities, healthcare delivery services entities, and make that their focus, and then beyond the CON. And with Lahaina, you can clearly see there's a desperate immediate need to start planning this out now.
Well, especially now that so many facilities have been destroyed, and they don't have access to what little they had access to before.
Yeah, exactly.
Senator,
that really creates a big problem to us.
Senator, while we wait for our guest to call in, you raised the issue of oncology, cancer, and toxic dust removal. Is there anything you'd like to update us on about that? How they're going to be doing that?
We're very concerned, as with other people. There's been kind of a disturbing trend that some entities in government are beginning to think that it's a whole lot of nothing and that there's nothing really to worry about. Again, when I went to try to connect up with the Colorado people, including our guest last week, on the toxic dust and what they had to deal with in the Marshall Fire, it's no joke. And I think a lot of my colleagues shared the concerns that, that this could affect the health concerns of workers working in the area now. It could cause health problems down the road for future generations. There's a reason why they're requesting a hazardous waste dump for the materials. So I think for us, like everything else we've been trying to do, is trying to get ahead of things somewhat by bringing them up in advance. Unfortunately, a lot of that has gone by the wayside, as we've seen. But phase 2 is upon us, allegedly, in the beginning of the year. There's still a lot of questions about it. And, of course, the mitigation strategy for containment of airborne dust, provided, if there's toxicity in it, is going to need to be something that is done. And, of course, the question with the Department of Health and others are wrestling with is the role of independent contractors that could possibly play a very bad and chaotic role, potentially, insofar as trying to ensure uniform regulation of the handling of the dust that has been tested toxic.
Well, I think, Senator, we all saw what happened with 9/11, where we were kind of innocent about the toxicity of the refuge and the air and what have you, and we've seen the results of that innocence, and we can't really say we're innocent now, can we?
No, well, exactly. And the thing is that we're really trying to dig into the concerns that have been raised with the monitoring equipment. There's this thing called purple sticks, which are an infield monitor, which are very sensitive, and it errs on the side of caution. So the strategy has been to place a lot of those into different areas, but also have the regular monitoring air stations that put their readings up on the internet. There have been some concerns about that there's no time of day or wind speed direction on the readings. However, they are in real time on the internet. But in my discussion with the Department of Health is, let's look ahead to phase 2. And if you have all of these orange bar warnings, that they call them, going off for an extended period of time, how does that figure into some, type of, especially with the schools, some type of, shelter-in-place strategy? And how is that issued, and what are the parameters used for it? And I guess the conversation back and forth is the DOE is relying on the Department of Health as a public health authority to issue guidelines and such on the different rulings, on the different readings, But the Department of Health is saying, well, it's kind of the Department of Education's call insofar as when they wanted to do their in-place warning. When we recommend it be done in yellow, but it's up to them to do, have that strategy. So my point is, okay, they're looking at you, Department of Health, as the public health authority to give guidance. You're saying it's a DOE call. They actually have their own environmental health officers, which is to me. And so the question then becomes, okay, what is the rule, the playbook? How many orange readings until you start the shelter in place? What does it entail? What is the notification system? And they really don't have anything. And so my stressing to them is you need to create some kind of parameters so the public, the parents, and the teachers and others know what the game plan is after certain criteria are met. But, right now it seems there seems to be enough loosiness in the whole thing where it's debate on whether the readings of the orange are, time and, immediate to set off, or if it's continuous or systemic. And my whole point to them is, with all of this debris removal upcoming, this is something that should be worked out now and then communicated out to the public yet again, so they know what's going on, right?
Senator, this is being under the title of Phase 2. Does that have anything to do also with the Army Corps of Engineers taking off the top 6 inches of soil. Is that part of this?
Yes, I believe so. It's part of the whole process of removing the debris out of it that has been found to be tested to be potentially and or tested to contain toxic materials. And that's what makes our fire, the Lahaina fire, so much different from the California fires, from what outside experts have told me, is that you don't have that element in there because it was all, it was forests and brushlands and farm communities. You didn't have this kind of urban conflagration in an area that has been really built upon over 100 years, over and over again, with all of these legacy chemicals and plus all of these new things that are there. I mean, this is probably, I think, in my memory, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, the first major fire I can think of where we had so many electrical vehicles burned up. And now the situation with them and the batteries and the toxicity all of a sudden became revealed. And so there's all of these different things that kind of put snags in the best laid plans of mice and men, right?
Oh, yes, exactly.
Once again, these things reveal themselves.
My understanding, Senator, and we're waiting for our guest to call in, my understanding is that the Tesla cars, for example, might have as many as 17 lithium batteries in them. And they all have to be what they call de-electrified, because they can't even be shipped. If you take them out of the car, you think, well, we got them out of the car. But they can't even be shipped until they're de-electrified. And then I think they go to somewhere in Arizona where they can be refurbished or remade, or they're broken down and used again. But they're very, very dangerous, more dangerous, I think, than people realize. Was there any discussion of that at the hearings that you talked to with Dr. Fink?
I'm sorry, you broke up in the last.
Has there been any discussion by the Department of Health or Dr. Fink or the hearings yesterday about this threat of these lithium batteries and how complicated it is to take them out of the cars and then do what they call de-electrify? It's been a very challenging struggle. We touched upon it. Most of our conversation was trying to look ahead at the next phase. But it's been very challenging, the removal of these batteries from these cars that are burned up, and they're unstable and could blow up, right? Right.
And so you've got that problem, and I think you have so many chemicals and things that were burned up and combined together, battery acids and batteries from all sorts of cars, kitty litter, oil, all sorts of things, and you've got all of those homes packed in with all of this kinds of things in garages and water heaters and everything else all being burned up at one time. So it creates quite a toxic stew, for lack of a better word. But what they're doing now is that one of the things we've talked about too is their sampling strategy and how they're doing it. And what they're doing is they're taking samples from within zones, and they're reporting the readings of all the elements found within a particular zone. Now, we're trying to get them to drill down further, like, okay, where is each sample being taken? And they're like, well, it's so small that we really don't track that. And I'm like, well, you should want to track it from an inventory standpoint and a time use standpoint, if nothing else, so you can possibly get the areas of the zone that are getting the samples. And there may be a need for some more sampling within that zone itself, but you can't. But even from accountability, you kind of want to track who's sampling what, when, and where. So that was my discussion with him, is to stress to him that there should be some kind of oversight or accounting, if nothing else, for cost and time and metrics, but also to create a map, or if you will, or some kind of a analysis of where areas and what zones are being tested and what additional tests should be done given the surrounding activities going on in that zone or area.
Well, Senator, our guest last week pointed out that even though in Colorado fire they thought they had gotten rid of all the toxic elements, later on they found that they were actually in the walls of the houses, dioxin and what have you, that they go in and do it all over again. So it's not something that's just you can put a deadline on it, is it? You've got to actually have a process in place.
Well, yeah, and it's environmental remediation, and that's one of the things that is going to be challenging for people in the zone, given the small amount of companies that operate in that space here and the equipment that they have. This is where I see a need for us to reach out for outside help and resources.
I see.
Because this is a kind of thing where we can align these kinds of outside resources to come in and do the environmental remediation and testing so the building is clear. And then I think to the point Mr. Bayon was saying is that if the debris removal around it, if there's no dust mitigation plan, toxic dust plan, and it gets kicked up everywhere, it can go right back and recontaminate all the cleaning and the certification of the house or the business you just done. And so what goes on around you is important too, insofar as trying to get a final certification of the structure is clean and doesn't pose any hidden health hazards.
Well, Senator, I know your listeners are going to want to be kept informed of this, and we will be talking about it in subsequent shows. Right now, however, our guest has called in.
Excellent.
To be able to talk about Lahaina Strong and the fish-in, etc. So let me turn the show over to you and to our guest, Senator.
Aloha for joining us, Pa'ele. Thank you so much for coming on this morning. Appreciate you being here.
Hi, good morning.
Thank you so much for coming here. My pleasure, my friend. But anyway, just so our listeners kind of can get to briefly know about you, kind of give us your story of, what was your life like on August 7th and before, and then how did it change for you on August 8th?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot to talk about, but August 7th, obviously life was normal, everybody had their roles, had their job. I was actually working, so me and my dad, we own a business together. We have roll-off dumpsters, so we have this big roll-off dumpster trailer that we take to job sites. Sorry, hold on 1 second. Sorry.
It's okay, my friend.
Yeah, so we have this our business that we run together. So that was pretty much most of my life, and I'm also president for Save Honolulu Coalition. So growing up, I always wanted to be an advocate for my community. I always saw the injustice for our people, and just seeing how our my family fight always was fighting. So there's two sides of the spectrum. My father, he was very, very fierce, obviously, very fierce person, but he would fight not the right way, And on the other side of the spectrum, like Uncle Kaikea, he would fight, for the community the right way, going in and always testifying and stuff. So I always saw how both sides of the spectrum was, there's power in both, but I saw how organizing your people and stuff like that. So
and it kind of and all of a sudden became a necessity, like within one day.
Yeah. So I went to, I put myself through college. I actually was living in Oahu for some time. So after college, I graduated college. I moved to Oahu, and I was trying to actually get into law school because it was always my dream to be there, to come back to Maui, and actually wanted to run for office. And that was my goal and my dream. So that's amazing. You should definitely. I hope you do when things with the community finally settle and move forward. You go to law school because the community could need your skills and your passion for what is needed ahead for everything that's going on. So I'm excited to hear that. And then we have the fire, which thrusts all of us, but into a surreal, unreal world. How did you in the
what was it like when the first response time, I guess? What was your, recollection of that period?
Yeah,
Anything that you stands out to you that you'd like to share insofar as, when that call came and everything was, everybody was fleeing, how you thought from your end, experienced it?
Yeah, so that morning, I got a call very early in the morning, just giving me warning that the winds were very bad. But the reason I got called so early is one of my roll-off dumpsters actually went flying in the wind. So,
wow.
And these dumpsters are, 30-yard dumpsters, so they're like 4,000 or 5,000 pounds. So when I received the call, I knew that, wow, it didn't really, I didn't understand. I was like, well, how can my dumpster go flying? So I actually made it into town that morning, and the winds were
they were nuking,
beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
Beyond comprehension. So, I obviously with the winds like that, I just pretty much left my dumpster where it was, and I figured, I went out throughout the town that day. I went down to Canoe Beach because I paddled for Kahana Canoe Club, and all of our boats were blown off the saddles, and they were, flying all over the beach. So I went down and helped secure some of the boats. I figured, well, there's no chance I'm working today, so I went back home.
Yeah.
And I got a call. I mean, obviously there was no power, there was no cell phone service. So in town I didn't have service, but I live out in Honokohau Valley, so I have Starlink Wi-Fi out there. So I have service regardless of what happens, with the cell phone service. And I got a call from my mom who lives on Big Island, and she told me, you need to go to town to check on your boat. So my dad also has a boat. There's a fire, and it's bad. And this is later throughout the afternoon, and I was like, oh, okay. So I start rushing into town, and then I see the severity of it. I get closer into town. I see this big plume of smoke, and I get stuck. As I'm coming into town, my entire priority changed. I was going to go get the boat. I saw the severity of it. I said, forget about the boat. I need to go get my grandma. My grandma lives right in the heart of Lahaina. And
wow.
I got stuck in traffic in Ka'anapali trying to get into town, almost in a panic because I'm like, I need to get there now. And luckily, one of my friends was leaving the area with his bicycle. So I beg him. I pull my truck over on the side of the road, and I asked him, "Can I use your bike? I need to go in and at least warn my grandma because like I said, you couldn't call, and I know, my grandma and her generation, they're very stubborn. So the likelihood that she would still be in her home was very high. So I rode a bicycle in the blasting wind for about 4 miles into town just to go over there and warn my grandma. And sure enough, she was still in the house. And I told her, we need to go now. And luckily, we had one of her tenants was there with us, and they weren't sure what was going on. Like, it was just a panic everywhere, and they didn't think that the fire would come through as quickly as it did, but it did.
Yeah.
And luckily, I got her out in time. But
wow, well, that's amazing. I mean, it's so fortunate that you were able to get out there. And I hear what you say. My mom, she passed away a couple of years ago, but she was same kind of thing. She would have probably been there too if she lived in Lahaina. I mean, because that's their generation, right? But that's so good to hear that you got her out. Everything's okay. But now obviously we're moving into this unknown, strange, surreal, apocalyptic world, and Lahaina Strong formed again, which it did in the beginning when Hurricane Lane happened, our last run-in with a fire. And you were really instrumental in helping to get Lahaina Strong stood up and to work with them. And how, tell us about Lahaina Strong and what they're doing and how they've organized themselves through this fires, and what exactly are the messages that they're trying to get out for the community that people need to listen to, in your opinion?
Yeah, so Lahaina Strong actually started in 2018. Her name is Jordan Ruiz. Yeah, and it started back when, the 2018 fires came through and burnt homes. And that following Saturday, I held a meeting with the community, and, we ended up reusing that name, and it was kind of reborn. Lahaina Strong was reborn. Ever since then.
Well, it was funny because I started throwing it around immediately too, because of the amazing job they did, in 2018. But one of the things that happened then, that happened in this fire that didn't happen then, was back then everybody could still text. They still had cell service, right? They could organize themselves into text change and kind of coordinate. This time there was nothing, and so the communications was not. In your mind, do you think that was a huge difference, and is that something that we, going forward, insofar as preparation, especially with other communities, need to really pay attention to, is ensuring communications in the community level?
Oh, definitely. That was a huge obstacle to overcome during those first, I don't know, it seemed like a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
that we didn't have service,
and we lost every tower, everything, and there was no. You use Starlink up in Honoka House side because of the issues there. Do you think that that kind of technology should be basically made more prevalently, available in areas so that they're available to be made right away? Like, say if there had been sat phones and Starlinks at the Kapolei airport that could have been distributed. Do you think that would have made a difference in at least restoring some kind of vital communication among the pods and the community members?
Yeah, I think that would have been huge. We've come so complacent with what we have that we don't realize when something small. Not something small. This is something huge, but something small as far as wind coming down and knocking down a cell phone tower, it can disrupt everything, right?
Yeah.
So we need to start thinking about these things, and obviously this is a huge wake-up call, but just makes us. We need to be prepared for things like this, because when those first couple of weeks when nobody had service, I was offering everybody to come out to my house to use my Starlink so that they could communicate with whoever. But if you see this on the news, whole town burnt down, and you can't even call in or trying to figure out if your family's okay. That's huge. But aside from that, those first couple of weeks I couldn't leave Lahaina. Lahaina was blocked off, but trying to get supplies in, trying to get medication in for people who desperately need it, and that's I just
we had arranged for a shipment of insulin from Kona on a private plane. All of the things that people were volunteering to take people, pick people up who needed insulin or medical help, and take them to the doctors. There was so much, but there was all that chaos, right? Because there's no communication, so everybody's running around trying to help, and then they're not able to talk to each other. So that's something I think is a front line of resiliency for the community going forward, is to ensure some kind of a communication system. But, one of the things that's come up has been, the power lines went down in 2018. They've gone down again. And do you think that there is a strong move now to finally look at undergrounding utilities, especially in areas like Lahaina, where this has repeatedly happened for 20 to 30 years? Is this something that the community needs to try to start to message and talk about? Insofar as going forward to prevent this from happening again potentially?
Yeah, well, that's if you talk to any community member out there, especially in Lahaina, everyone agrees that the power line should be underground. And for myself, I understand that it's very expensive process. Anywhere in the billions of dollars just to put that infrastructure underground, but you can't put a price on a life.
Well, you cannot. And there's areas like where, I mean, to do the whole island or do everything would be hugely, like you said, billions of dollars. But when you have a section like in Lahaina town where the poles have gone down, I mean, should government be looking at, okay, this area, we got to underground it make it a priority because of this historical happening over and over and over again. Do you think that's the strategy government should use for undergrounding? It's to basically look at the areas where it's been the most severe and start there as a way to balance costs?
Yeah, definitely. I would agree 100% on that, because we can't continue to do the same thing over and over. There's been fires 2018, and then a few years later, same thing happened, fire again, and then now this tragedy then. And
then back in the day when I was small kid, and this is old time now talking, I mean, we had the poles went down on the highway, and they had to use the sugarcane train for like a week to get people back and forth out of town, to go to school, to go to the doctor, to go to, remember that thing? This has been happening for decades.
But
right?
you know that we have one way in, one way out. We got to make sure that all of our infrastructure for traveling, especially traveling communications, that those things have to be solid 100%. We can look back in history, and that's probably something that a lot of our officials do not hold, or they don't have that knowledge of. Just there's so much to learn from our ancestors, and if like this wind happens like once in a generation, right? The Kaula winds. There's stories of this, but knowing that if it's been consistently throughout history, maybe that's something you should consider when putting in that infrastructure. And this is the type of stuff, like if I was ever to get into a position of leadership, obviously, yes, I'm going to look forward, but I also need to look behind me to make sure that I'm learning from what happened prior.
Yes, that's very wise. And, the Kaula winds, actually, there was a fire. Lahaina town did get burned down before from a Kaula wind-driven fire back in, like, the 20s, but it was a different Lahaina. It's a small plantation town, right? And it was all small wooden buildings and everything burned. The only thing left was the safe in the bank. They had a picture. The Theo guys had a picture of it. That was the only thing left. But that was a way different Lahaina. It wasn't as big. It wasn't as extended. It wasn't as, an integral part of Maui and all of Hawaii, in many different ways that have happened. One of the things that, since the fire's happening, the community, the members have been struggling to try to give voice and support to the victims in many areas that is still needs to be addressed. And one of the areas is obviously housing, a need for quality, dignified housing where families can have some sort of agency. But things have been slow going. So Lahaina Strong did an awareness campaign, a fish-in town of Holly Whalers Village, to try to bring awareness to this issue. Exactly for the viewers, the listeners out there, what was the message Lahaina Strong was trying to get to the powers that be about the critical need for housing? And then how did the fish-in go? Do you think it was a success insofar as getting the message out? And what was your reaction of that and the theme behind the fish-in insofar as housing goes?
Yeah, so I mean, as most people know, like it's very expensive to live in Hawaii, and a lot of our accumulating issues, one being, having a lot of short-term rentals, and that has driven up our rental prices in general, through the roof, because you've now taken these what were once long-term rentals and turned them into short-term rentals. So now, if you're trying to get a long-term rental, now your availability has now shrunk, so and therefore your prices are going to go up. But as far as where we're at now, this crisis of housing was, years before the fire. But
yes, it was.
Yeah. Well, because now the entire town is gone. Now our people are displaced. they're staying in the hotels. But because there was a rush to open Lahaina back up so quickly, because certain powers that be wanted to get our economy up and going again, and we believe that we need to hit some benchmarks first and getting our people in, more long-term housing and other issues that need to be addressed.
Agreed.
But
You
because
can't
we open up
stand
tourism
an
so
economy
quickly,
with the basics of the society are in shambles.
yeah, and that's where we were. Like there was nothing against tourism. We just wanted to make sure our people were taken care of. That's the only thing that mattered to me and our community.
Exactly,
But,
and that's the kind of things that the visitors expect too. I mean, in my dealings with several visitors have come in, and I know there were a lot of visitors who visited the Fish-In campaign and who were supportive of the message and the work that was being done, and quite embarrassed that the situation is like that. They didn't know. As one person said, it's like we're being advertised a false bill of goods.
Yeah,
as to
and
what,
that's like
what
part of what
reality
Lahaina
is
Strong is trying to do is create that messaging to educate people, to actually keep them informed of the actual situation. So because we rushed to open.
So do you think one of the things that came out in the Colorado experience was there was a lot of public discourse and disclosure of different pieces, especially moving ahead into different phases. And, phase 2 is supposedly, I put my fingers in the air when I say that, upon us in the beginning of next year. But do you think that the community deserves a lot more answers and clarity insofar as how this is going to go, given the potential health effects that could occur? And how much discussion has been occurring in the community about this? Or do you think that the needs to address housing and other things are front and center first because they still haven't been addressed?
Yeah, I mean, well, there are so many aspects that are like of equal importance, right? That everyone's concerned about. So, back to your first question on like what we're doing with the housing. So obviously that's a very pressing issue right now for us, because we tourism is ramping up. Hotels are needing to make room for guests. Therefore, our people are being displaced and they're being shuffled around again. So that's kind of where we're coming from. We're like, we want dignified housing for our people.
Yes.
And we want to get them in a longer term, a place where they can be long term and know that they don't have to move again and again and again.
Yeah.
I mean, people have moved 8, 9 times now. So you can't really heal after something as tragic as that happened, when your anxiety is spiked every single day, thinking that, you're going to get a call or that you have to leave your hotel room in 48 hours. So part of the strategy with this is, there's that specific list of short-term rentals that fall under the Minatoya list. And,
what exactly is the Minatoya list? I mean, it's been used and, referred to, but those who may not be aware of it, is it a list of approved short-term rentals, or is it just a list of short-term entities?
So a list of short-term, basically all of these places are grandfathered in, and you don't have to, they are unpermitted, but they are not illegally operating because they were grandfathered in. So most of these homes were actually, or most of these short-term rentals were actually where a lot of our residents used to live before they converted their their long-term rental into a short-term rental. And
exactly.
Now we're almost
a lot of homes were bought by people who live elsewhere to basically speculate as short-term rentals. There was never because of that Minatoya list inclusion, and now becomes a more valuable property to buy, right? And so that, of course, increases the value of the property. We're under an emergency proclamation, and some have said that because it's an emergency and because 127A applies to the region, that the government has the power and the ability to be more controlling of the housing inventory in the market to ensure best use for the most need. You think that the government, the county, or the state, or both, should be much more proactive in trying to get a control of the housing market vis-a-vis the limited inventory and the need of the fire victims? How do you, I guess, what ideas do you think could be used to try to generate this need to convert this Minatoya housing, other short-term housing, or timeshares into housing for fire victims?
Yeah, I mean, this is an opportunity for us to spearhead the issue as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like our people are going to need these places. The likelihood of us, you know, breaking ground and building the first house is not, you know, it's looking like it might happen in mid 2025. I mean, that was like a projected date, but you know, the rate at which things are going is not, it doesn't seem very encouraging to know that we're going to be able to get our people back into their properties and homes anytime soon. So
yeah, I mean, under insurance, lot line setbacks, all of these issues which have not even been addressed are looming out there. And that's the concern I have, is you could have a situation where people are basically, they have no choice but to take what insurance money they got and sell. And then you have, like, the sign says coming in Lahaina town, Lahaina is not for sale, but it is for sale. So, I mean, this is something that and I guess we're kind of, and I'll second with our time, Tom, but our time may be up here shortly. But do you think that's something that, you know, we need to look at, both the state and the county, coming in the next session, is trying to create or have to look at some kind of entity to bank land that is now being sold out all over the place, so it just doesn't end up in a free-for-all? Or what do you think, what's the discussion been insofar as the issues that we've discussed and the and difficulties of rebuilding Lahaina with the people who live there?
Yeah, so, like, I mean, yeah, I would love for our officials to, you know, to get involved with securing, making sure our people can stay here. Like, the only reason Hawaii is as beautiful as it is, Hawaii is beautiful physically to the eye, but what makes it actually beautiful is the soul of Hawaii, and that is their people. And, you know, there was that fear from the first day already that our people would have no choice but to sell. Yeah. Because,
well, I can tell you this from my friend, and that was over my dead body.
Yeah, well, that's
because that's the character of Lahaina, the soul of Lahaina was his people.
I'm willing to give my life for my place.
If you're going to rebuild Lahaina, the people have to be part and parcel. Or I saw a plastic rebuild of a town destroyed out when I was doing the research for these other things, and that was an example to me of what will happen if you rebuild and the people are lost. You get a plastic caricature of what was before, and so that's why I appreciate the work you have been doing. And my best to your family. You have a very blessed Thanksgiving, and thank you for everything you're doing. And I look forward to talking story more with you and working together with you and everybody as we move into the next session. But again, thank you for everything you've been doing, my friend. We really appreciate and you sharing your story on the air today. We know that was tough for you to do, so thank you for doing that.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, aloha. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, aloha.
Well, Senator, that was a great interview, and I think we see where the new leaders are coming from. They're coming from the youth who are getting involved. So that's a great story.
The forge of disaster produces, you know, bright metals. You know, I mean, the cream rises high, floats faster to the top as the chaff falls to the bottom in a disaster. And so, you know, for that, you know, for him to step up and, you know, in that way, and continue to be involved with everything that's going on and still trying to heal, you know, I appreciate, you know, what him and everybody is doing. And all they're trying to do is get the messages out that we've been trying to get out since even the very beginning. And, you know, it's not to say, hey, what we've been able to accomplish is we're glad we've been able to do it, but so much more needs to be done. And there must be so much more veneer two-way communication across all levels. And hopefully that will continue to be the case. But on a lighter note, or more of a celebratory note, I want to wish you, Tom, and you know, Gary and everybody a very happy Thanksgiving. I want to wish all our listeners and everybody from District 6 a happy Thanksgiving too. Now more than ever, I think this is a chance for us to reflect upon what we have in our lives, and maybe not what we have lost or don't, what we have, but most important, I think our guest summed up the best, it's the people. I'm thankful for the people I have in my life, and I think that the disaster shows us we're very lucky to have the people in our lives. And so, I hope that you and yours have a great and safe, happy Thanksgiving, and that together we continue to move together and celebrate and cherish the people, because not the structures, are the important thing.
Well, you're absolutely right. There was a bumper sticker I saw years ago that says, no Hawaiians, no Hawaii. So I think it's very important. We're coming up to the end of the show. I'm reminded of the words of John F. Kennedy, who reminded us that although we can have these feelings and we can honor them, the reality is it's not the words we utter, it's the deeds that we do that will measure us. And so on this Thanksgiving, Senator, it's a pleasure to work with you. It's a pleasure to see you in your leadership role and to be mentoring younger people. And so from Gary and myself and everybody here at the radio station, we also wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. And before we leave, can you very quickly tell us how people can get a hold of you, Senator?
Yes, back to the main thing here, which is you can get a hold of us. Please reach out if you're having issues, especially related to fire, help, assistance, such like that. Phone number 808-586-6070. Our email address is sen, S-E-N, McKelvey, lowercase one word, at capital CAPITOL .Hawaii spelled out .gov. We have my amazing staff, Wendy and Beth, are there to help you. Anybody in District 6, please call any issues. We won't promise you guaranteed results, but we will promise we're going to work 100% to try to fight and get a resolution to your concern. If you're not in our district, no worries. We're great with our counterparts, the new Senator Troy Hashimoto and, of course, Linda Coit. So please reach out, and we'll coordinate with them to ensure that, the representation of all your Maui offices can help to your problem.
Well, Senator, one last tricky question for you. What year was the first Plymouth Colony Thanksgiving celebration held? Do you know?
What was the year the first Plymouth Colony
The Plymouth Colony, when they had the Thanksgiving, what year was that? 1621. I wanted to pay you back for that. This is a payback for the question you gave me last week when I didn't know the answer.
1691, you said?
1621.
1620. Oh, the payback for the question. My question was to give you a softball, what you wanted to talk about anyway.
And, Senator, we want to be
Congress.
sure. Happy
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
A continuing resolution so the government won't shut down.
There
Happy
you go.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Be sure to tune in to Capital Connection every Wednesday at 7 a.m. right here on KOI 1110 a.m. and its affiliated stations. Senator, aloha and happy Thanksgiving.
Aloha, everybody. Thank you for listening. Hang in there, as the kitten on the poster says, and happy Thanksgiving.